Have you ever really thought about the verb to be?
It seems so simple.
Right. Just a little three-letter word. But today we're going to show you how deep it really goes.
That's right.
We're going deep on to be.
We are. And you know what's interesting is we're taking a unique angle on this.
We are.
We're using a guide on teaching English as a foreign language to Spanish-speaking preschoolers.
We are, which I love. It's a grammar lesson from a preschool textbook.
Exactly. And what's great about this is that this guide, Como enseñar el verbo to be a alumnos de infantil, it takes a very fascinating approach.
It does.
It really emphasizes clear, very simple language and relatable examples.
Yes.
Which we'll see are actually very effective.
It's brilliant. I mean, before we get too far, can we just go over like the basic structure?
Yeah, absolutely.
How does this article break down the verb to be?
Yeah, so they break it down into the three structures you would imagine: affirmative, negative, and interrogative.
Of course.
So I am happy.
Right.
I am not sad.
Are you excited?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's cool about this is that it really shows right from the get-go how to be is like the backbone of so many sentences.
It is. It's everywhere. I hadn't even really thought about it, but it's everywhere.
It really is. And it's not just about, stating your existence. It's about your emotions, describing things, even just forming a question.
Yeah. And they use such simple examples to get this point across, like yo soy rubio, which just means I am blonde in Spanish.
Exactly. And it's so simple, but if you think about it, it's actually quite sophisticated. Well, because they're teaching to be as both the main verb and an auxiliary verb right from the get-go.
That's true.
And they do that by using these simple examples, and that lays this really strong foundation for, if you're a young learner.
Right, like these kids.
For more complicated grammatical concepts later on.
Yeah, for sure. Now, this guide also points out that to be is an irregular verb.
Yes, it is.
And this is where things get kind of interesting.
It does. I mean, they even go as far as to say it might be the most irregular verb in the English language.
And it's true. I mean, most verbs follow a pretty predictable pattern when we conjugate, right?
Right.
But to be just throws the rule book out the window. Am, is, are, was, were. Like, what is going on?
It really is. It's a shapeshifter.
It is. Why? Why is it such a rebel?
Well, I mean, I think it's because, unlike most verbs that describe actions, to be is all about a state of being.
Okay.
It's really fundamental to how we perceive and express, even our very existence, which is why it has so many forms.
That makes sense. It has to. I mean, we're complex beings.
Exactly. And so it's essential, but it's also quite challenging.
It's true. It is. So it's like the Swiss Army knife of verbs.
You could say that.
It's got a tool for every occasion, right?
That's a great way to put it.
Even if those tools don't always look the same.
Exactly. And just like learning how to use a Swiss Army knife takes practice, mastering to be requires you to really kind of get a handle on all those forms and all those functions.
So we've got this Swiss Army knife of a verb.
Yeah.
You can do it all, but how do we actually get a handle on it?
Well, I think that's what's so cool about this guide.
Okay.
They really emphasize simple, relatable examples, which makes sense. I mean, these are for kids.
Right, like little kids.
Yeah, they're not going to bog them down with,
Technical jargon.
Exactly.
Right, so using examples that are familiar to them.
Exactly, and familiar to all of us.
Yeah, that's true.
Just, those everyday situations, descriptions.
Yeah, and they even use the example in here, tu eres médico, which is just Spanish for you are a doctor.
Exactly. Simple.
Yeah.
And it makes perfect sense, right?
That does.
Because, as humans, we connect with information that's relevant to us.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely, yeah.
Right. Like, if I can see how this plays out in my life, in my world.
Yeah, that's how you learn it.
And then it clicks.
Yeah. It's like you can read a recipe a million times, but
right.
I think you taste it, it doesn't.
Exactly.
It doesn't come alive.
Yeah, you got to taste it.
Yeah.
And so this guide's focus on children's learning, I think, is actually quite insightful for all of us.
It is.
Because it reminds us that no matter how complex a concept seems, you can ground it in these really relatable examples.
Yeah.
And then it makes it accessible and, dare I say, enjoyable.
It does make it way more fun.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, it's like by using these simple examples like I am happy or you're a doctor.
Yeah.
You start to internalize those forms without even realizing it.
Exactly.
It's kind of sneaky, like subliminal messaging or something.
It is. And that brings us to, I think, another fascinating thing about to be that this guide addresses really well, which is contractions.
Okay, yes, contractions.
Yes.
So that's our linguistic shortcut, right? To make us all
Ugh.
sound a little bit more natural.
Exactly.
Yeah, less robotic.
And they even have a nice little table here in the guide about these contractions. So affirmative, I'm, your, and then negative, isn't, aren't.
Yeah,
And this might seem like a small detail,
right.
but it plays such a huge role in fluency.
It does, yeah.
Think about it. If you hear somebody speaking, any language fluently, they're not
They're not pausing.
stopping to enunciate every single word.
They're not robots.
Exactly. They're using contractions to really connect their thoughts smoothly.
So it's like the difference between driving stick shift and automatic.
Okay, I like that.
Like once you get that clutch down, you can really flow.
Exactly, exactly. And so mastering those contractions, it really does require you to, internalize those short forms.
It does.
Until they become second nature.
And until they're just natural.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. So you're not just speaking English, you're speaking it like you own it.
Yes, exactly.
It's amazing, right?
It is.
Like you think you know something like to the back of your hand, the verb to be, and then we go on this deep dive and I'm like, wow.
Right.
There's so much more there.
It's the simple things.
The contractions. It's wild.
Yes. The things we take for granted.
We do.
Mm-hmm.
So what does this all mean for, like, the average person who's listening to this right now?
That's a great question. I think it reminds us that there's always something to be gained by revisiting these basic concepts. Whether you're, a native speaker or you've been speaking English your whole life or you're just starting out, there's always something new to learn about the very basics of, any language.
Absolutely.
And to kind of look at it with fresh eyes, I think, is a really valuable thing.
Yeah. It's like being mindful.
Yes.
Of even these little words.
Exactly. And how powerful they really are.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good takeaway for me, at least.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So on that note, I think we should probably wrap up this deep dive
Yes.
into this surprisingly complex verb, to be.
It is surprisingly complex.
It is. And on that note, thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you next time.